Can you hear it? Can you feel it? Change. Change is coming, people. Right? We need to get uncomfortable. We have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because change is coming. All right. I hope you all enjoyed participating in our reverse panel concept and hearing an array of thoughts and views about what truly makes for a livable community, which, of course, includes a functioning, welcoming, and smart approach to land use. Here to talk to us now about the built environment and how important our commercial corridors are to our quality of life, please help me welcome Kacey Lizon from SACOG and Aaron Laurel from the city of West Sacramento.
Good morning, everyone. Real quick, do I have a slide? I do. Okay, I do. Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to be here to talk with you about transforming commercial corridors. There we go. Okay, so I want to start off by just grounding us in what SACOG is and why am I here talking with you. The Sacramento Area Council of Governments is a council of the 22 cities and 6 counties in the Sacramento region. We come together, actually every single city and county has an elected representative who comes to SACOG twice a month, and we staff them there, and they work on regional planning. They look at our 6-county region, and they're looking at where do we need to grow and how do we get there over time. So they do transportation, planning, policy, and funding. They do land use and housing policy. Sometimes, because when they come together, they're trying to identify what are the issues that are affecting all of our jurisdictions, all of our cities and counties that are really bigger than any one community can solve, and they will come together at SACOG to try to figure out how do we address this. And so at SACOG, there's been discussions about flood protection and wildfire preparedness, lots of different things. Really a lot of things that having to do with the built environment. And that's what I'm here to talk about, some opportunity and some challenge within our built environment. What is our built environment? Well, we've talked about this. Actually, some of the speakers already talked about it very eloquently. Our built environment is this building, right? It's the blocks that you traveled, whether you walked or rolled or biked or drove here, on the streets, the roadways, the neighborhoods that you live in, the housing, the shopping, the buildings for jobs, the parks, the schools. That's our built environment. And I'm here to talk about a particular part of the built environment that is an opportunity, and that is our commercial corridors. Now, SACOG comes together to do this work. We do this through our blueprint. It is our regional plan. It sets policy and priorities for funding for the 6-county region to try to help us to accommodate growth into the future, and really according to what the board has adopted recently as a triple bottom line framework. So trying to plan for the future in a way that is equitable, that actually identifies and addresses today's disparities and reduces those, in a way that can be prosperous for our economy, for everyone in our 6-county region, and in a way that's environmentally sustainable so that we can continue to live here, so that people can move here and we can be here for generations to come. So that's a tall order to try to plan for the region given the existing challenges that we face, the existing disparities, the existing inequities that we have, the existing neighborhoods that have been here a long time, some of which are needing some more love, needing some more attention, and that's what I want to talk about commercial corridors and the transformation of those. So every community has a commercial corridor. In some places it's a main street, in some places it's, the big, strip center where there's an avenue, right? Like think Watt Avenue or Auburn Boulevard or Douglas Boulevard or Folsom Boulevard, right? Stockton, all of these different boulevards that were all originally kind of the original highways for people to get around. Decades of transportation policy at the federal and the state and yes, the local level were focused on turning these corridors into places that moved automobiles in particular through communities, moving them through as quickly as possible. And so what we ended up with is a built environment that was really great for moving cars, although arguably when you get enough cars there, then it's not great because you're all sitting in traffic, right? But great for moving vehicles, but not a great environment for people. Like it's, you think of these commercial corridors as places that cars might want to go shopping, or cars might want to go, to the grocery store or what have you. But for people, it ends up being pretty hostile. And that you can see in the unsafety of commercial corridors for walking, for biking. You can see that in the fact that people don't get to travel around as much, and we have a public health crisis that sort of comes up and is contributed to by the built environment. We obviously also suffer from the air pollution that a reliance on driving creates. And of course, that built environment and the way that we have to travel around is a major contributor to the climate crisis that we face. So why is there an opportunity in these commercial corridors? Well, the reason for that opportunity is that many of these places are in need of some love. They're in need of some reinvestment, some refurbishing, some replanning, some re-envisioning. And they're in every single one of our communities. And think about how the built environment affects some of the main livability factors that you'd heard about in the presentation earlier today, right? So affordable housing, livable wages, quality education. The built environment plays a key role in how well people are able to access those things. The built environment is where we live, right? It's where we can choose to live, or where we are able to actually afford to live. And based on where we live, that also really influences what jobs we're able to get to, how long it takes us to get to those jobs, what mode we have to take to get to those jobs. And it also influences our access to education, what schools we're able to get to, how long it takes us to get to those schools, how we're able to get to those schools. So the built environment is inextricably linked with our livability. And commercial corridors, which are these places that need more love and reinvestment, are ripe for that. They have been created to cut through communities, but as many of them built in the 20th century are kind of reaching the end of their functional life. You got buildings that need reinvestment. You got roads that are in need of repair. There's an opportunity there to transform those places into people-focused places. Think of all of the giant parking lots that you see when you're going down a major commercial corridor. Think of the empty lots that are there. Think of some of the buildings that have been vacant for a while because there's not really a great use for them. These are all places that could be reimagined, right? They could be replanned, they could be reinvested in with affordable housing, with different kinds of housing for different life stages, so that maybe the businesses that are there would have more customers who are nearby, who could maybe walk or roll or bike to those businesses and not just have to drive, so that there could be more opportunity for parks and open space built into these new communities, so that there's the opportunity for jobs nearby. And if you don't happen to be able to meet your daily needs in these communities by just walking, rolling, or biking, maybe you would decide to take a short transit ride because you wouldn't have to drive to whatever your other destination is. This is the idea of a complete community, and these corridors, I think, are a key part of transforming themselves, those actual corridors, and enhancing the neighborhoods around them. And so my call to action to all of you today, and I heard many of the speakers from the tables earlier giving you all a call to action, so I'm just piling on. I'm underscoring the call to action. Every single community in this region, as I said, has a commercial corridor, has that place that needs some love. So get engaged. Go find out where is planning happening, because I guarantee you it's happening in your city or in your county. If you're in an unincorporated county, find out where that's happening, participate, bring that vision for how these corridors that were once just scars, cut-throughs of our community can actually weave our communities together. So with that, what I'd like to do is start to transition to an example that we can talk about. And I'm going to introduce you to West Sacramento. It's one of SACOG's 22 city members. It was incorporated as a city in 1987. And those who've been around in the region for a while will hopefully note that the evolution of West Sacramento has been taking place steadily for a number of years. There's been a lot of careful planning that has led to today's successes in West Sacramento, and it serves as an example of what the future could hold. I want to say it's an example, and I want to acknowledge that every city, every county, every community is unique. It's a place with its own history and design. And so when you hear about West Sacramento's story, I want you to not think this is going to be exactly my story, but what can I learn from it? What can I take from it, and what can I bring back and engage in the shaping of my community? So I am going to turn to Aaron here. Let's see if my mic works here.
Yeah, same here.
Mic. Yes. That's for you. And can you all hear me? Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to turn to Aaron here. Aaron is the city manager of West Sacramento, and he's been with the city for a very long time,
Yes.
which is great because we've got a history to be able to learn from. So we invited West Sacramento to speak to us today because there is a ton happening in the city over the last few decades, especially in the Washington and Bridge districts. And these are areas that are close to downtown Sacramento, just over the river, and we're starting to see the effects of lots of planning, lots of preparation, lots of focus from community leaders. So given all of that, Aaron, can you give us some background on the Washington and Bridge districts and why these neighborhoods and corridors that are connecting between them have been a focus for West Sacramento?
Sure, thank you, and hopefully, mic works well. First, I just want to say thank you for being able to participate in this. It was really cool to see the previous session. So many good comments that weave into this. And if the speaker from, I think it was table 36, could move to West Sacramento, that'd be awesome. The one that talked about the importance of infill development and creating a local economy. So I have been with the city for a long time. It's been almost 19 years. I've been the manager there for about 5.5. So a lot of the work that my career's focused on has been around the projects I'm going to be talking about today. And Kacey's right, West Sacramento has a lot going on. When we think of commercial corridors, you think of all the places that Kacey said, but West Sacramento is unique in that we also have this sort of industrial legacy along our riverfront. So when we talk about places transforming like the Bridge District and the Washington District, from where they were, say, 30 years ago to where they are today, I think it's important to start with some local context. So first, these are areas that make up our riverfront corridor. They're very old places. We've been focused on making them into vibrant mixed-use areas with all of the amenities like retail, housing, office, amenities like parks, everything else you'd want in a cohesive urban environment. And I'm going to take a little longer with this first answer just because I think it sets up a lot of what we're trying to emphasize today. Today, West Sacramento's riverfront may seem obvious that it's a great potential, great place for this sort of infill mixed-use development to happen, but it wasn't always that way. If you've been around long enough, you'll remember. We incorporated just 36 years ago, and a lot of it was around that principle of opening up the riverfront. People that were in West Sacramento from back in the day when it wasn't a city, but it was very much this industrial riverfront that no one could get to. That was one of the main reasons why incorporation was driven. You couldn't really access the riverfront. You couldn't do it legally anyway. There were railroads crisscrossing everywhere. There were warehouses, grain silos, and not a lot of opportunity apparent at that time. So the Bridge District in Washington, they make up about 170 acres apiece, so about 350 total. To put that in context with another site that's similar, the Rail Yards is about 250 acres just across in Sacramento. And like the rail yards, it was definitely, these are areas that were developed not for mixed-use development like we have today, and it was mainly for river-oriented industry. Like I said, it was mainly to support the agricultural industry, so rice silos, there were, like I said, railroads all over the place over there. The port was developed, the actual port of Sacramento was developed in the 1960s. So once that occurred, it really made those uses antiquated, drove them into obsolescence, and a lot of them became vacant, kind of abandoned. And that's the West Sacramento image a lot of people had from that time when we incorporated them, maybe the late 80s. So they're very old places. They were developed at a time when no one really seemed to care about concepts like livability, like at least in an urban setting. It was all about getting out of these urban areas and really affecting some of the development patterns that we're still, now we're looking to reverse. So the riverfront was physically divided from the rest of the community. And a lot of the infrastructure, part of the problem we had was most of the infrastructure that was developed was for the turn of the century, but it was the turn of the last century. So it was for the type of development that was from the late 1800s, early 1900s, and that's a lot of what we had to deal with going into present day. So to top that off, we also have a state highway that ran through West Sacramento. So connecting 50 over the Tower Bridge, they decided to build an elevated freeway that disconnected the Bridge District and the Washington District. So this was the setup we had when we incorporated back in '87. This is what we had to overcome. And so I want to talk to you about how we did that and how that may be applicable lessons for some of the commercial corridors that many of you are interested in. So the main point is that we took very deliberate actions to change the market conditions so that urban livability could take center stage. That's a 30-year process that's still ongoing. But today we have over 1,000 housing units in that area. We have amenities like the barn in Sutter Health Park. We have the CalSTRS and Raley's headquarters as office space. We've added unique places like the Riverwalk, the Mill Street Pier. We have a boat dock over there. Lots of public art. But like I said, after 30 years of work, we're really just getting started. So I'm going to just give you a quick, this is a north to south rundown of some of the places in the Washington District and the Bridge District. I want to thank AJ Tindick at SACOG, who is a West Sac resident and took most of these. So on one side, if I can get this to work. Uh-oh, the battery's running low. Okay.
It's the green one.
Yeah, not working. Okay, you know what, forget the slides. I can, if we can get that to go, if someone in the back maybe could just run through, that would be great as I'm talking. It's more just a visual representation. And that really leads me to the big picture comment. What you'll find, if you could see the slides here, we have a great mix of urban amenities, everything from, like I said, housing to retail, restaurants to office space, and a lot more on the way. But again, that didn't happen overnight. It took a lot of deliberate investment into the urban setting, and I want to talk about how we did that. But the big picture comment is I'm a strong believer in market forces. And what I mean by that, the market will dictate what happens or doesn't happen in your community. And I mean that in a bad way. In other words, the market is really mean. It really doesn't care what your community wants, and it won't respond the way you want it to unless you can create the economic conditions for those outcomes to take place. So in an urban setting, the market on its own is not going to fix deficient infrastructure. Like I said, that was one of our main issues in these riverfront areas. You had infrastructure that was built to accommodate warehouses, not to accommodate infill housing. It's not going to clean up contaminated properties. It's not going to help build affordable housing. It's also not going to build park space. These are all the things that require direct intervention by the public sector to make happen. So in a place like our riverfront, which had all this great potential, and there go the slides, kind of giving you an idea of some of the improvements we have over there and some of the outcomes. We had all this great potential, but these very significant obstacles to investment, we had to take the lead role. And in order to transform commercial corridors, that's really what it takes, whether it's the public sector, meaning local government, or community organizations like many of you represent, to recognize what those obstacles are and take deliberate actions to overcome them. So what do I mean by that? I can tell you in West Sacramento what that meant, and there were generally about 5 or 6 things that really mattered. So first, and this one often gets too much credit, is planning, land use planning. You do need to have strong plans, you need to have good vision, but it needs to be realistic, it needs to be grounded in what market realities will be once the outcome is achieved and all the things that are required leading up to it. And the first one of that is really the infrastructure investment. We were tasked with building new streets, new underground infrastructure, really had to rebuild this entire environment before we could put the first housing unit in the ground. And that was a lot of what we did in those early years. Also, real estate acquisition. And this is a hard one because a lot of times it doesn't make sense to buy property, and this is where local government really comes in. To be able to assemble sites, to put properties together that can ultimately be developed and improved with infrastructure so that those outcomes can occur. The other related one is addressing brownfields. We had quite a few either real contaminated properties or perceived contaminated properties that were barriers to private investment that we had to assess and clean up. The last two, though, are really the most important. It's kind of the old cliche of money and political will. You need both of them. You need to be able to access funding. We were very successful in doing that with both local funding, but also grants at every level of government, including from SACOG, and also having consistent leadership and strong leadership that was really the driving force behind that transformation. And that leadership happens at all kinds of levels. I don't just mean our elected city council members, which are extremely important, of course, but also people like yourselves that aren't elected officials that represent community organizations or groups that are the voices that need to be heard so that real action can take place. I really enjoyed hearing people come up here and talk about, what are we taking from this? What are the actual things we're going to do? Because a lot of time we get, especially in transforming these corridors, you get so hung up on, oh, it'd be great if we could do that, but not enough time is spent on tangible actions to make it happen. So, long answer to question one, but
great.
Thanks.
Yeah, well, it was an incredible history that you just went through, so it would have to be a long answer. And there was so much effort that went into the transformation that's happening in the city. And we know it can be challenging to bring along leaders and community members through a shared vision for outcomes of that area. Can you talk about how West Sacramento was successful in creating a shared vision and how it continues to keep community members and leaders engaged and supportive, because this change takes time?
Sure, it does. And I mentioned previously that we did have that really consistent leadership. We had a fairly consistent city council, and we still do. The sort of the values that embedded the incorporation and the transformation of our riverfront and other parts of West Sacramento are still true today with everyone that is on the city council. We've also only had really 4 city managers in 36 years, and not to overstate the importance of people like me, but it's consistency that transcends the entire organization that keeps people focused and all kind of going towards the same goal. So that was a key ingredient in West Sacramento. I think when we talk about what drove the change in our city, especially along the riverfront, it speaks to that original principle that people wanted access to the riverfront. They wanted to see it become a place where no matter where you live in West Sacramento or what background you're from, everyone kind of wants the same thing. They see it as a place where we'd like to have more recreation opportunities. We'd like to have better access to places like the river and to downtown. We'd like to have more places to shop and places to eat, more opportunities for jobs and more housing opportunities of all kinds. So for the better part of our history, that was really the momentum that drove that. And I think the real challenge now, looking beyond the riverfront, comes from looking at other places in West Sacramento where, again, those private market conditions aren't, just changing things on their own or improving conditions on their own in some of our more disadvantaged areas. To use an example, we have a corridor called Sacramento Avenue. If any of you are familiar with West Sac, you know what I'm talking about. It runs through the Broderick and Bright neighborhood. It's probably an old highway at some point, but very much in need of just some basic infrastructure improvements. We have a lot of sidewalk gaps. We have a lot of older built infrastructure and buildings that need some love, like Kacey talked about. So as we enjoy the success we've had in the riverfront, we keep working towards realizing the ultimate outcomes that it has potential for. We can't overlook those other parts of town where, again, it's all about intervention by the public sector, or else things just aren't going to happen. It's intervention by the public sector and by the nonprofit sector to drive those changes. And so I think to keep people engaged in West Sacramento and keep them excited about where the city's going, our city council's done a really good job of kind of elevating some of those areas and taking, again, deliberate actions towards improving them. And that's a really important thing going forward.
Thank you for that. Okay, now that is keeping folks engaged in the vision. Now I want to get a little bit down more into like what the experience is of all the work that you're working on. So I talked a little bit earlier about complete neighborhoods and how being in a place that's easy to get around and is close to amenities like shops and parks and restaurants can have a positive impact on where we live. So what does a complete neighborhood look like in West Sacramento?
Yeah, I think the way I'd answer that, I'm not going to give you some so unique definition that shouldn't apply to anywhere else, because a complete neighborhood, I think, has the same ingredients. But I can give you some direct examples of what we're doing to create it. So I think it starts with the notion that you can access everything you need or want to do in a short radius. And you want to have that be true for everyone, regardless of income. And so for housing is the most important ingredient, both the diversity and the quality of that housing. It's also challenging to achieve that when you care about housing affordability, which our city does and has demonstrated so. So in West Sac, we put affordable housing at the forefront of everything we've done in these kind of rebuilt urban environments. If you drive around the Bridge District or walk around it, even better, don't drive, or the Washington District, you'll see many, many examples of affordable housing, both in a newer form, but also housing that was built as early as sort of the early 90s after the city incorporated. We always have more in the pipeline, but just like we need the need for affordable housing, we also need the quality and diversity of housing at every level. Because remember, we're ultimately trying to support a complete economy in that area. We have the CalSTRS headquarters, we have the Raley's headquarters, and those are very valuable assets when it comes to a balanced community. So housing of all types is essential. Housing also drives retail growth. A lot of people forget that. That's why I like the comment from table 36 over there. You have to have the people and the critical mass to drive everything else. Retail, employment, you name it. That's what attracts those amenities to a neighborhood. And also office is kind of a topic right now. I'm not sure anyone's ever going to build an office building in our lifetimes again, but hopefully it'll come back eventually, and it's such an important thing for having a complete environment. So a complete neighborhood has a mix of housing. It has all those other uses I talked about to have those synergies, a 24-hour population, and a critical mass where everything can work in tandem. And the other part that we can't overlook, it's one of the most important things, is an emphasis on mobility. In an urban setting, you don't want every household to have to own 2 cars. So in order to do that, you have to give people choices of how to get around, and so especially to places where they can't just walk to wherever they're going. So in West Sac, what we've done, we have a mobility action plan that has implemented several different forms and modes of transportation, centering first around building walkable neighborhoods and bikeable neighborhoods that are well connected, but also choices, whether it's taking a bike share or scooter share. We have a program called VIA, which is a on-demand point-to-point shuttle service that operates within West Sacramento. Of course, taking the bus, and hopefully soon our main transportation amenity that we still lack is a really strong connection to downtown and the rest of the built environment around us. And we're working on a light rail connection right now to connect into downtown Sacramento from West Sac.
Thanks, Aaron. How am I doing on time? Can I get a couple questions? All right, I'm gonna do 2 more.
All right.
One of them on the short side, and then we're gonna close out, okay? You can decide which one's short.
Sure.
Okay, so to the community members who are here today, who want to see changes implemented in their neighborhoods and their communities, what would you say are the key elements that make projects like the Washington and Bridge District successful?
Yeah, I think I just go back to my original point that, like you said it earlier, every community is a little different, but it's often the case where some of the basic things that are lacking to make transformation happen in the built environment are the ones where our role is so important. We talk a lot about just making neighborhoods more walkable, and if you actually try to walk some of these corridors, you'll find some really basic things that are lacking, whether it's sidewalk gaps or safe pedestrian crossings. And so it's just using that example as one where you don't have to be a city staff person or an elected official to make note of those things and get involved and get engaged with your local community to raise awareness for them, and then to actually start to work on taking real actions to overcome them. So you mentioned local government. We're usually pretty good about staying ahead of some of those issues. Where we're not always great is building the momentum and building the excitement around them so that you have people like yourselves that represent a diverse array of groups and organizations kind of see the importance of these things and engage in the process of making them happen. So a lot of what we rely on is grant funding. And so in order to get grant funding, you need engagement, you need people that are organized and supportive of the amenities and the improvements that you're trying to do. So I would say, can't stress that enough, just to identify, what are those things that you're lacking. That's what we spent a lot of our early years, probably the first 20 years or so in the Bridge District, was just doing a really good inventory of what needed to be changed in terms of the infrastructure improvements, and then being really deliberate about going after funding and putting projects together to make it happen. So I would say at different levels of that process, there's plenty of opportunities to get engaged.
That's great, thank you. Okay, and here's our final question for you. From a city and a city manager's perspective, What would be your dream for how community members and leaders are involved with the seeds of change? What can they do now to help those seeds grow and fulfill long-term visions?
Yeah, that's a really difficult question to answer in my role, especially because a lot of what we do, you can imagine in local government, we hear a lot of diverse voices. And so I think part of our job is to coalesce those into things that people can all agree on. So I think when we talk about, again, just using my example is the one that we've had most experience with, and actually I'll use Sacramento Avenue. I think on one like that, what we've done, I think a pretty good job of so far, is to hold the type of events and engagement opportunities that really meet people where they are and bring people to have a voice at the table. I think historically local government's been really bad about engagement when it comes to, hey, just show up at a public hearing and, why didn't you attend the council meeting? And, we had like 3 meetings on this and we didn't hear from you. That's not the way to engage people. It really never has been, but especially in a modern sense, that's even more important. So with Sacramento Avenue, we've done a lot of things online. We've done a lot of social media outreach, but we've also done lots of things. We're going to be doing a lot more to meet people where they are in community events and other places where we know people are already there so we can get direct feedback. It's also giving people a chance to engage in a way that makes them comfortable. So it's not, you don't have to be an expert in mobility to be able to get your point across to us. So we need to give people outlets and tools to be able to give that sort of feedback and in their lived experience be able to give us really good input that we can translate then into real tangible improvements. In the Sacramento Avenue corridor, one of the main ones that we sort of predicted that we would hear, and it's been sort of validating to hear that, okay, yeah, that's really a top issue for people, are those sidewalk gaps. You have, again, 2 low-income neighborhoods that are connected by this roadway with schools in between. You have school children walking in these areas where, they have to, it's sort of dangerous to get from point A to point B. So that little example alone was one that, we were again, validated to hear. We can do something very direct about it. And I think there's lots of other examples like that in not only our example, but in some of yours.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. I'm always inspired to hear West Sacramento's story because it's ever changing, it's ever evolving. And I hope that you all glean some inspiration, some lessons, some things that you can take back to your communities so that you can drive the change that you're trying to see there as well. So thank you again.
Thank you, everybody.